January 1944. Before dawn, the Pacific Ocean lies heavy and unmoving, its surface broken only by the slow roll of steel hulls. Salt hangs in the air. Diesel fumes mix with the distant smell of cordite. On the horizon, faint silhouettes emerge. American battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, forming a line that stretches beyond sight. Somewhere on a coral island ahead, Japanese soldiers wait in silence, gripping rifles, listening to the sea, unaware that the morning will redefine their understanding of war itself. To understand why this moment mattered, one must step back to the foundations of the Pacific War. Imperial Japan had built its military doctrine on speed, discipline, and the spiritual endurance of the soldier. Its navy prized precision, torpedoes, and decisive engagements. American industrial power, by contrast, had been underestimated. Many Japanese planners believed the United States lacked the resolve for a long war across vast oceans. They expected hesitation, shortages, and cautious firepower. What they encountered instead was a level of naval gunfire never before experienced by men on land. By 1943 and 1944, the United States Navy had transformed itself into an industrial force of unprecedented scale. Battleships like Iowa, New Jersey, North Carolina, and South Dakota carried main batteries of 14 and 16-inch guns, each shell weighing as much as a small automobile. A single broadside could hurl tons of steel across more than 20 miles. Behind these guns stood factories that produced ammunition by the millions, railways that carried shells to ports, and cargo ships that
crossed the Pacific in endless rotation. This was not merely naval strength, it was industrialized certainty. Japanese soldiers defending island fortresses such as Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa expected air attacks. They were trained to endure bombing raids and small-scale shelling. They had dug deep caves and tunnels into volcanic rock, believing that fortifications and spiritual resolve could neutralize enemy fire. What they did not expect was the sound. The sound arrived first, low, distant, almost like thunder beyond the horizon. Then it grew. Naval gunfire did not scream like bombs, it rolled. A deep, rhythmic concussion that pressed against the chest and rattled bone. When American battleships opened fire, the ocean itself seemed to recoil. According to U.S. Navy firing logs, battleships at Iwo Jima fired more than 6,800 rounds of heavy-caliber ammunition before the first wave of Marines even touched the beach. Cruisers and destroyers added tens of thousands more shells. Japanese after-action reports and post-war testimonies described the effect with restrained astonishment. Positions carefully camouflaged vanished in seconds. Entire ridgelines collapsed. Caves thought impregnable became tombs when shockwaves traveled through solid rock. One surviving Japanese officer later wrote that it felt as if the earth had been lifted and slammed back down repeatedly. Another compared the shelling to a steel typhoon that did not pause for breath. The recurring symbol of this experience was the shell itself. Massive, relentless, anonymous. American shells arrived not as singular acts of violence, but as a continuous presence. They did not
ask whether a position was defended bravely or weakly. They did not discriminate between ideology and flesh. They arrived because they could, because American industry ensured that there would always be another shell and another and another. This was the emotional contrast at the heart of the experience. Japanese soldiers had been taught that courage and sacrifice could compensate for material shortages. They believed that an enemy so far from home would tire, would conserve ammunition, would hesitate. Instead, they faced a navy that fired with an almost unsettling calm. U.S. gunners trained methodically, rotated crews, corrected fire by the book. Ammunition expenditure reports reveal no panic, no scarcity, only efficiency. Historical records reinforce this imbalance. During the Okinawa campaign alone, the U.S. Navy fired more than 1.9 million rounds of naval gunfire support. Battleships maintained bombardments for days at a time. Admiral Raymond Spruance later noted that naval guns were used not only to destroy enemy positions, but to protect American infantry morale by ensuring constant pressure on the defender. Firepower became psychological as much as physical. For Japanese defenders, this realization was transformative. Survivors began to understand that this was not simply a clash of soldiers, but of systems. Where Japan relied on the spiritual endurance of individuals, the United States relied on a machine that could not be exhausted easily. The shells kept coming, even at night, even in poor weather, even after days of continuous firing. The idea that American resolve might break under losses faded with each
new barrage. This experience altered perception in profound ways. Some Japanese soldiers, interrogated after capture, expressed disbelief, not at American bravery, but at American capacity. They spoke of ships that seemed endless, guns that never overheated, ammunition that never ran out. The shell became a symbol of something larger, a society capable of converting factories, farms, and railroads into sustained military power across an ocean. Yet within that symbolism lay a deeper ideological contrast. American naval gunfire represented not only abundance, but a form of collective organization. Each shell was the product of thousands of unseen hands, miners, machinists, engineers, dock workers, operating within a democratic system that mobilized its population without absolute coercion. The Japanese soldier faced not just an enemy army, but an entire economic civilization focused on victory. As the war progressed, this realization spread. By 1945, Japanese strategic assessments openly acknowledged American material superiority as decisive. The thunder of naval guns became, in memory, the sound of inevitability. Even the most disciplined defenders could not fight the ocean itself when it hurled steel without pause. In the final months of the war, as American fleets moved ever closer to the Japanese home islands, naval guns continued to speak. They bombarded coastal factories, rail yards, and airfields. The same sound that stunned soldiers on distant islands now echoed within sight of Japan itself. The shell remained the symbol, unchanging, heavy, unstoppable. In the end, the story of American naval guns is not only about destruction, it is about what sustained power.
Looks like when ideology, industry, and logistics align. For the Japanese soldiers who endured those bombardments, the lesson was harsh and unforgettable. Courage could delay defeat, but it could not silence a civilization capable of producing thunder on demand. Long after the guns fell silent, the memory remained, not of individual battles, but of that rolling sound across the sea. A reminder that freedom, when backed by collective effort and abundance, can project itself farther than fear ever could.